Hi, I'm Yasmin, a wife and a proud new mom with a background in perinatal nursing. Welcome to Birth Unboxed, where we talk about all things birth, whether it's unassisted free birth, home birth with a midwife, or in a hospital. I believe every woman deserves the right to choose how and where she gives birth. I created this podcast to raise awareness so women can make informed choices and feel empowered in their births. By sharing stories and learning from one another, we can reclaim our power and become the ultimate authority in our own birthing experiences. Sisterhood is powerful, and I am so glad you're here. Let's get started. Hi, Taylor. So thank you so much for joining me today on the Birth Unboxed podcast. So I'm really excited to hear all of your stories because you have 4 stories, 2 hospital ones. One was a hospital induction, and then you had a unplanned free birth, and then an intentional free birth. Is that correct?
Yes.
Awesome. So take us back to the very beginning, wherever that beginning is for you, because I really want to see what the transition has been like for you from going through your very first birth as a first-time mom and choosing to birth in the hospital, and how that experience was for you, and then all the way to your very last birth and how everything has changed for you in terms of how you view birth, how your experience at home on your own contrasted to your experience in the hospital, where, you know, as much as sometimes there are great doctors and great nurses, you are kind of giving up your power and authority to the hospital. So yeah. I'm really interested to see how all of that shifted for you. So take us to the beginning.
Yeah. So let's see, my oldest will be 6 in June. So this was like what now, 7 years ago. I was pregnant, and I don't know, I've never really had a great relationship with my parents and my mother-in-law. Anytime we kind of chatted about birth, wasn't really like, it wasn't very informative. It was kind of just like in passing, we would kind of have conversations here and there, potentially. And then, so I didn't know anything. Like, I was not there for any of my siblings' births. I didn't know anything. I hadn't seen anybody give birth, nothing. I had no idea what I was doing. So I went with whatever doctor everybody had suggested and everyone loved. And I met with her, and like halfway through my pregnancy, I was like, this lady is not my favorite person to be around. In fact, like, I kind of dread going to these appointments because I don't feel like they are centered around me at all. I feel like they were she just kind of talked at me a lot. And I was like, I don't know. I can understand why some people probably love you because you talk and they don't have to do anything. But I was like, I am used to being the one that does the talking. And so to have somebody else that is supposed to be potentially helping me, not potentially, but it's supposed to be helping me prepare for birth, for my first experience. I didn't feel very supported, but I had no idea that I could switch, right? Because they have you sign the contract when you go to your first appointment, and they're like, this is how much money you're going to pay us. And if you start paying now, then you won't have any to pay later. But they don't tell you that there's actually like thousands more dollars down the road that you're also going to be paying. But so I was already paying her and everything. So I was like, oh, I'll just, whatever. And so let's see, I went into
just to clarify to our listeners. So Taylor is in Florida. So she's talking about the American healthcare system, which if you don't have insurance, you're paying out of pocket.
Yes.
And I think even some insurances, you probably still have to pay something extra, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And just the way you said, like, you just, went with the doctor that everyone was going to. And that is what most people do. Most people don't really know anything.
No.
They just go with what everyone else is doing. So,
yeah,
it makes sense that that's what you did. Yeah.
Yeah. And I had been recommended. My mom, the doctor that my mom went to had retired, but I think his son started. She was like, why don't you go to him? And my mother-in-law was like, I saw the doctors over here. So like, I had recommendations, but I went with what everybody around me was going to. the OB that everybody saw. Like if you lived in that area, and this was in Utah actually, because I just recently moved to Florida, but this was Utah. But everybody was, everybody was seeing her. And so I was like, okay, I guess everybody loves her, so we'll go.
Yeah.
We'll go there. So I was working through my entire pregnancy also. And I started my maternity leave when I was 39 weeks. And so my last day of work, I decided that the next day we would go spend, we were living in an apartment complex, we'd go spend the day at the pool. And so I was like, let's just go to the pool. I feel huge. I want to feel weightless and get the pressure off. And what I didn't realize that I was dealing with was SPD. And so I was really struggling to roll over in bed and just walk, and we had to walk upstairs to get to our apartment. And so everything just hurt. So I wanted to feel weightless. So we went.
So just for those who don't know, SPD is symphysis pubis dysfunction. Or disorder. It's dysfunction, right? And it's just, so it's a lot of pain as your bones are starting to open more. You can feel a lot of discomfort in your hip and groin area, and it can be extremely hard to just open your leg and turn and walk and all of that. So especially at 39 weeks.
Yes. And if you are dealing with that, you can fix it. Go see a pelvic floor therapist.
Yes.
Because it's not something that you have to deal with during pregnancy, even if your provider is saying it's normal. It's normal. It's just something you're going to deal with. It'll go away after labor.
Yeah, there's a lot of exercises and things you can do to help. I had some of it too, and it does help when you're doing that. Yeah.
So my provider at the time, my OB, didn't explain any of that. Everything was just, that's normal. That's what you deal with. Like, that's just, it'll go away after you have a baby. I'm like, this is really painful. But we went swimming, and I woke up probably around 3:00 in the morning to contractions. And so I decided to go out into the living room because I was really struggling to stay in bed. I went out to the living room and just like turned on the TV and was eating some food, and they were coming consistently, right? And so I was waiting for that. Contractions are 5 minutes apart for an hour long.
How long were the contractions?
I don't remember. I think I just was hitting that 1 hour. I was hitting that 1 hour, 5 minutes apart, and was like, we need to go to the hospital. Yeah. And so like I hit that, and I don't even remember.
Were they really intense already?
No, I don't. Okay. Yeah, I don't really feel like I was really struggling with anything. Like I was kind of struggling to sleep, but I think it was more anxiety than it was the contractions were preventing me from sleeping. And so I woke up my husband at like 7 and was like, hey, it's time to go. Like, let's go. And so we had a 30-minute drive to the hospital. And in that 30 minutes, my contractions had stopped.
Yeah.
And I was like,
very common.
Yep. I was like, just keep going to the hospital. Like, just keep going to the hospital, and we'll just, because we're already on our way. So we went up, and they checked me, and I was dilated to a 4. And so because I was at a 4, they kept me. And immediately IV, immediately started talking about Pitocin. And within 2 hours of me being there, they were like, the anesthesiologist has scheduled surgeries this afternoon. So if you want an epidural, right now is probably going to be your only opportunity to get it where you don't have to wait. So I was in the hospital, not even really experiencing contractions at this point, but being offered the epidural, which I took because I was terrified of the pain, because that's all I had ever heard was it's going to be painful.
Yeah, and when you have people coming and telling you like it's going to get bad if you don't get your epidural now, you're going to be in so much pain later, you're going to have to wait, and it's going to be horrible. So you're like, oh, okay, then I guess I'll take it.
So I did. I got the epidural, and then they started me back on Pitocin. And at this point, it's like 11 o'clock in the morning. So I had I had woken up around 3, decided to go to the hospital at 7. So we're only like a few hours really into labor, which actually wasn't even going anymore because I had stalled out on the way to the hospital.
And then the epidural as well can make everything slow down.
And so I got the epidural, and they were just jacking the pit up. Pitocin was just going up. Every time they come in, let's throw it up, let's put it up, let's put it up. So I was on like the max of Pitocin, and I was stuck at an 8. And they were coming in probably once every hour, hour and a half-ish to check me. And it was getting pretty late. It was probably around 10, 11 p.m. I was still at an 8 and had been at an 8 for about 6-ish hours at that point. And they were like, if you don't progress, then we need to start talking about other options. And in my head, I'm like, babies come out 2 ways. Babies come out vaginally or C-section. So like, there's not really a lot of options to be discussing other than when you think you're going to try and wheel me back for a cesarean. And I was like, I do not want a C-section. So I asked my husband to pray with me, and we started to kind of feel more comfort, more at peace. I had been given also IV pain meds, so I had the epidural and IV pain meds, which allowed for me to sleep. And they came in and checked me, and this was going to be their last time checking before they started to kind of really push. You've been in labor too long, and they had broken my water at some point. All of it's really foggy too because of how many drugs I was on at this point. So my water had been broken. I had been in labor for a really long time. I had the epidural all the way up on Pitocin, and finally I was complete within like.
So what time was that?
Within like it was probably like 2 a.m. at this point that they came in. No, it was a little bit before that. It was probably like 1:30. 1:30, I was complete because they were like, oh, you're complete. Like, let us know when you start to feel pushy. And within 30 minutes of that, I was like, I'm pushy. Like, I'm going to start pushing. So they came in to do practice pushes, and my practice pushes were too good because then my doctor comes flying in to throw on her gown and everything.
Yeah.
And pretty much just catch my baby and cut the cord. And I couldn't tell you about how the placenta went. I have zero idea. I was fairly
it's usually
out of it.
Right after. As soon as your baby comes out, they clamp the cord, cut the cord, give you the baby. And then as you're like, oh my God, I have a baby. They already pulled out your placenta. It's all like immediate.
You
probably would have noticed it.
A few seconds with him too, because I was on antidepressants through my whole pregnancy. So they were like, we need to go double check him. And so they gave him to me, and I held him for like 2 seconds, and then they whisked him over to their little...
The warmer.
Yeah, and started doing everything. And I'm hearing them, and they're all trying to take guesses, because he was huge, on how big he was. And then I was over here. I know I was getting stitched up. That was like the first thing that kind of started to click on what was going on after I had him. Was my doctor was stitching me up. So yeah, it had to have been really quickly that my placenta was out after that, because I don't remember it happening. The first thing I remember is being stitched. And then they brought my baby back to me, and then very quickly started to try to get me out of that room and move me into a different room. And he is my only baby that's ever ended up in the NICU. He ended up in the NICU for low blood sugar.
While you were still in the hospital.
While I was still in the hospital. And so we were there for, I just was looking this up. I think we were in the hospital for 3 days after he was in the NICU. So,
how was breastfeeding for your first baby after that whole experience?
Nope. So I pumped for 6 weeks. I wanted to breastfeed really, really, really bad. And so I kept pumping, but he wouldn't latch. I couldn't get him to latch and to stay on. And everyone was like, it's because you're so engorged. Like, there's nothing. And so then I would try to pump and latch him, and like nothing was working. And again, I knew nothing. I had no idea that there were IBCLCs, International Board Certified Lactation Consultants, had no clue. They do make you take the breastfeeding class at the hospital.
Okay. It's
But that was
mandatory.
like, yeah, that was like within the 24 hours after I had him. But like, I don't take my baby to that class. Like, the baby
Mm.
stays at the nursery. I go to that
Oh.
class with the other couples that also just had
Mm.
a baby in the last, day or
Mm-hmm.
two that they're at the
Yeah.
hospital. And I'm like, wouldn't it be better if my baby was here
Yeah.
and we could
Exactly.
be practicing these things instead of just sitting here?
Yeah.
And so he later got diagnosed with a tongue tie and a lip
Mm.
tie, and we got those revised when he was 2. But I
Okay.
did around 6 weeks finally get him to latch. And
Oh,
then we were
wow.
able to breastfeed until he was like 10 months old. And then I got pregnant
Wow.
again. So my supply
Mm.
dropped and his interest in
Yeah.
food went up. And so
Yeah.
we kind of
Mm-hmm.
swapped that. So that was my first one, which honestly is so blurry. I've had to go back and read it a few times to kind
Yeah.
of piece
Yeah.
things together because of the amount of just
Mm-hmm.
anxiety and chaos and
Totally.
drugs and
Yeah.
no informed consent, nothing, just
Mm-hmm.
this
Yeah.
is what we're
It
gonna
really
do.
feels like an out of body experience in
Yes.
a way. It's kind of like you're there and things are happening to you, and you're
Yes.
just kind of like out of it a little bit,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm assuming then your first experience was not something where you were like, oh, this is amazing. Like, I can't wait to do this again.
No, I knew that I wanted more kids. So it wasn't going to stop me from having more kids. But I knew that I wanted to do things differently. I just didn't quite know what they were, what I wanted to do different. Because I didn't really know what my options were still. So I started my second pregnancy. I was only 10 months postpartum when I got
Mm-hmm.
pregnant with my second. And that was kind of right in the middle of COVID. So COVID started and the hospitals started to have all sorts of restrictions on visitors and who could be there. And so I kind of started to think about different things that I wanted to do. And we were doing summer sales in Minnesota for the first part of that pregnancy. So I wasn't getting any sort of prenatal care. So I didn't feel like I was kind of stuck with somebody. And so when I got to Utah and kind of started to figure things out, I chose a hospital midwife
Okay.
because at this point we were on Medicaid. So going to the hospital again would be completely free this time.
Mm.
And so I was like, let's just do that. I really wanted to do home birth or a birth center, but we were not financially in a place to afford paying a midwife out of hospital. And
So in the US, if you do choose to have a home birth, the health insurance would not cover that in any
no,
way.
no,
You would have to pay out of
definitely
pocket. Okay.
not state insurance.
Okay.
There are some insurances that will reimburse. You kind of have to fight or know
Mm.
what codes to use, have your midwife put in, or things
Mm.
like that. But for the most part, if you're choosing out of hospital, you are choosing to pay 100% out of
Okay.
pocket.
Which is insane because it's much cheaper for them
Yes.
than a hospital birth.
Yes. And so anyway, we weren't planning on having baby number 2 and we did. So we weren't really financially prepared for that situation. So I chose a midwife at the hospital because I was like, midwife, less interventions. She was fairly medicalized, which is not surprising. Midwives in the hospital are
Mm-hmm.
still under hospital policy.
Yeah.
But I had planned that whole pregnancy to go at least unmedicated and not get induced. And towards the end of pregnancy, I was starting to have really, really bad SPD pain again. And I was
Mm.
complaining to my midwife one day, and she's like, there's nobody on the induction list for tomorrow. And this was just a couple of days before my due date. And she's like, there's no one on the induction list tomorrow. You for sure would be called in first thing in the morning, and we can start you, low and slow on Pitocin and kind of see where you're at. Like, both of these pregnancies had been already dilated before going into labor, usually somewhere between 2 and 3 centimeters. And
Mm-hmm.
so she's like, you're already at like a 2, it will be easy. And so I agreed to it with the caveat that if I wanted to not go, then I would not go. And so I was trying to get a hold of my midwife at this point later in the day because I didn't want to get induced. I was like, I could just handle it. So I wanted to just cancel so that they wouldn't try to call me at 5:00 in the morning and interrupt my sleep. And I couldn't get a hold of her. So when they called at 5:00 in the morning, I kind of looked at my husband and was like, let's just go. And if it doesn't go well, you know, I'm not going to let them break my water. Like if things don't kind of pick up in the first couple of hours, then we'll just go home. So we went. And again, I was on like the highest amount of Pitocin because they were like, these aren't doing anything. And so she came in around 3. She's like, you're like at a 5, like 6. If we break your water, then you should complete super fast. And so I let her break my water, and within an hour I had a baby. So the nurses that whole morning were like, you shouldn't be laughing. You should be crying. You should be in pain. I don't understand what's going on with your body.
Wow. So no epidural, no nothing epidural this time. Wow.
But once my water was broken, those contractions were so painful.
Yeah.
So painful. And I don't think anybody came in to turn my Pitocin down at that point, which is probably why they were so painful. Like I thought I was mentally prepared for those, but Pitocin contractions are so different. I thought I was totally mentally prepared to go unmedicated, but they don't warn you about how bad those Pitocin contractions can be.
Yeah.
And I had a really awesome nurse. She was actually really new, and so she was still being shadowed by a more
senior nurse.
Senior nurse. Thank you. And so she was still being shadowed, but she came in and we chatted and kind of talked about how it's going. She was super supportive. She's like, I just want to come up with a code word though, that if you decide that you want an epidural, something that you would never say unless you were absolutely serious that you wanted the epidural. Because she's like, I know that sometimes moms will go and then they'll be like, I want the epidural, but they don't really mean that. It's just vocalizing kind of how hard they're working to get baby here. And so we came up with a word. I don't even remember what it was, but came up with a code word just in case I decided I wanted an epidural. But she was so sweet and so supportive the whole time. So yeah, they broke my water at 4 p.m. and I had my baby at 4:30. So water was broken. I went from like a 6-7 to complete.
Crazy.
And to baby kind of just pushed his way here. He came out in one single push, but I was white knuckling the hospital bed because I didn't know how to calm myself down at that point, how to get control back into my body. But once he was out, that experience was so much different. Even though there was Pitocin contractions, I was still connected to my body. So I could experience that whole thing, and nobody was whisking him away because I wasn't on antidepressants through pregnancy, and was able to kind of just hold him. And I do remember feeling like I could do that again right now.
Yeah.
I could do this again and again and again and again. And so that experience was a step up.
Yeah.
But I knew that I still wanted to be out of the hospital.
Yeah. So it seems like you were coping extremely well until your water's broken. It was pretty much a transition where that is where you lose it, where it just becomes too intense and where you don't think you can make it. So that's amazing that you were able to cope without an epidural, because the Pitocin contractions are so intense and Pitocin doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier. So you're not getting those endorphins to help with the pain, and it's just pain and just one after the other. So that's amazing. It's very rare to have people not get an epidural.
Very hard. I do wonder what it would have been like if they had turned down my Pitocin. If it would have calmed them down slightly so that I could kind of get grasp over myself again and kind of let the body go, because I feel like To compare the Pitocin to the two births that I've had since that with no interventions,
Mm-hmm.
those were so absolutely painful and difficult to work
Yeah.
through. Whereas
Yeah.
these other two, I don't feel like I did anything more to mentally prepare for labor, but was able to cope with contractions very differently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Can't wait to hear about those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I again got pregnant 9 months postpartum with my third baby.
Just a quick interjection here. So you were saying you were on antidepressants the first time,
Yes.
and then you had babies really close together, and it's very overwhelming to become
Yes.
a new mom and then to have another baby. So how was that? How was your postpartum, especially after the first one? How did that go for you?
The first one, when I look back and kind of think about how that went, there were a lot of circumstances around my postpartum that were not fantastic. We were living in an apartment that we couldn't afford without my income. So we moved when I was 2 weeks postpartum into my parents'
Oh,
house.
okay.
And I didn't do anything. Thankfully,
Yes.
I did have a lot of people show up
Good.
to pack and to move my house. So we moved most of my stuff into a storage unit and moved back into my parents' house, which has never been a good idea, but it
Mm.
at the time was the only place
Mm-hmm.
to go. Um,
And
and
that's during
so,
a very sensitive
yes.
time. Yeah.
And so, like, when I look back at that, I was pretty much sleeping all day. And if my baby was
Mm-hmm.
awake, I would take him to somebody else in the house and I would go back to sleep. And
Mm.
then I would go get my baby to feed him and to nap with him. And then he would wake up and I would give him away. And finally, I kind of found
Mm-hmm.
myself in that cycle and was like, okay, this is not working. I'm not doing anything like
Mm-hmm.
productive. I'm not taking care of myself. And most of it was I was trying to hide in my room
Yeah.
so that nothing nothing blew up in my house.
Yeah.
There was
Yeah.
no fighting that could happen if I was
Mm-hmm.
in my bedroom not talking to anybody. I think at the time all three of my brothers were still living at home.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no, one of them was serving a mission for our church, so he was gone. So I had two brothers living at home still, um, who I don't really fight with, but I do not have great relationships with my parents,
Mm-hmm.
and haven't for forever. And they've never been helpful when it comes to depression. So I had been diagnosed with
Mm-hmm.
depression since I was 14 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And I had never really had the support to navigate depression other than go to therapy and here's some pills. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's kind of was their way of dealing with my depression. So I was trying to kind of just stay subconsciously, not necessarily very
Yeah.
consciously, but subconsciously stay away from an experience that would make things
Yeah. Just trying to
worse.
protect your space in that
Yes.
very vulnerable time. Yeah.
So, and then we moved to Minnesota to do summer sales, and that was fine. That's where I kind of started to make a couple of other mom friends and was kind of coming back out of being depressed. Um, I don't know, Utah. I don't do winters well, which is why we ended
Yeah.
up in Florida. I don't do
Mm-hmm.
cold, dark winters are not helpful or
Mm-hmm.
healthy for me, and so that's why we moved to Florida last summer. But so yeah, my first postpartum was not fantastic. My second one, we were now living in my in-laws' basement,
Mm-hmm.
and that one
Okay.
was better.
Yeah.
That one was better. It still wasn't fantastic, but it was better. There was a little bit more support there. Um, but I do have the tendencies to fall into depression very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't until my third pregnancy that I kind of started to figure out what is going to really help me stay out of falling into a depression. And with my second, he was born in January too. So my postpartum was right there in the middle of winter.
Yeah.
And I was living in a basement. So I was living in a basement in the cold winter.
Oh, yeah.
And so I had to be very conscious about getting outside or leaving the house or doing things and not isolating myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and with him too, breastfeeding came much easier because I did learn about tongue ties. His got diagnosed very quickly and was revised very quickly, and we were able to again nurse until about 10 months postpartum when I got pregnant. Again, my supply dropped very, very quickly. If I was pregnant while breastfeeding,
right away,
it's over. So
was that the first sign that you're pregnant?
No, actually, I knew I was pregnant.
Yeah.
The day that it happened, because I was like, I just had an ovulation test, and so I knew when I found. I don't know how much you want on here. You could probably edit this out if you want to.
Oh, no problem. No, I find it very fascinating, and I'm sure a lot of the listeners do too.
But yeah, we ended up pregnant this time because my husband's condom did not stay on. And I picked it up and was like, I ovulated this morning. So say hello to baby number 3.
So you knew.
So yeah.
Does your period come back like pretty early on?
No, so with my first, I had 1 cycle and then was pregnant.
Okay.
With my second, same thing. 1 cycle and then I was pregnant. And so this was literally like my first cycle. I was like, yay, I'm finally actually going to be able to like track my cycles the way that I want to. And then was like, just kidding. So yeah, 2 weeks later I had a pregnancy test and was like, yep.
Wow.
Yep. So I was now pregnant with my third baby. And immediately was like, will not be doing the hospital. I don't want any sort of pressure if I'm in pain or not coping well with just symptoms. I don't want any pressure to induce. I don't even want someone to offer to induce. And so I did find a midwife in Utah who comparatively the cost in Utah, I would say on average for a home birth midwife is somewhere around $5,500 to $6,000. So $5,500 to $6,000, which is not bad. Which is not bad when you consider what the bills will be for hospitals. So like unless you have like super amazing insurance, you're going to be paying about the same. Yeah. And so I was like, we're going to make this work. But I did find one who was way less than the average in Utah because her philosophy was that she feels like every woman should be able to afford to birth at home. And she's like, I don't have a lot of costs anymore. This is more of just something like, I just want to keep serving women. Yeah, is essentially what she wanted to do, which I was like, I love this. She was very sweet. She was a little kooky, but that is to be seen. She had spent a lot of time in hospital settings before she moved to home birth. But so I did have midwifery care through that entire pregnancy. It was so different. Hour-long appointments. She had a whole place set up for my 2 boys to be able to play and be entertained while they were there. It was very, very family friendly. Yeah. And she always had something to talk about. she would like, she would always, this is the appointment that we usually kind of go over, you know, what it would look like if you were to get diagnosed with just gestational diabetes, or do you have any questions about like coping mechanisms or those types of things. And so she always had something to discuss, to kind of educate or to answer questions or to bring up questions that she's like, this is what a lot of moms ask. And so she always had something, and that was so different from my previous care, where I didn't feel like I was being educated.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And so it was a complete 180 in care. She did everything herself. She did blood work herself. All of everything was in her office, minus the anatomy scan. But so with this one, I had 2 due dates, because we had one from when I was like, I'm fairly certain that I ovulated, to what the cycle should have been. And so we ended up with like 2 due dates, and I was like, whatever. I know that I tested positive for ovulating on the day that I conceived. That's the only way that I would have gotten pregnant. But because they were so close together, we didn't choose a different date. And this was the first pregnancy that I stayed fairly active during pregnancy. I was going to a gym. It's called Burn Boot Camp. So it's like a 45-minute workout run by a trainer.
Do you find that staying active made a difference in your overall well-being? Yeah.
Yes, because I was at Burn the day that I went into labor.
So wow, so you worked out until the very end. Wow.
So I was at the gym, and they were doing some fundraiser, and they were like, you have to do 100 squats, but for every like $5 that you donate to the fundraiser, you can drop off a certain amount of squats or something like that. And I was like, you know what, 100 squats will probably put me into labor, so I'm gonna just 100 squats. So I did. I sat there and I did the full 100 squats.
Wow.
And then I wasn't convinced I was going to go into labor, but I was still living at my in-laws' house, and they were out of town this week. So I had been like really praying and hoping that I would go into labor while they were out of town.
Yeah.
Because I was like, it's so quiet.
Yeah.
There's nobody to like worry about. They don't have to try to leave the house, which was their plan, was to like, they were going to leave and let me labor and not bug me and everything. And I was like, if we just go into labor while they're not here, then nobody has to worry about any of this. And so that night I went to bed and was not very hopeful, because I wasn't experiencing any sort of labor signs. But I woke up in the middle of the night to my husband going to the bathroom, and I was like, well, I'm awake, so I should probably go to the bathroom. And
how many weeks were you at this point?
I was either 39 or 41 weeks.
Okay.
And based on his size, I feel like I was 39 weeks.
Okay. Which
would mean that my due date based on ovulation was correct. And not this other one. But I was like, I should probably go to the bathroom. So I was laying there waiting for him to come back, and I heard a pop. And I was like, what just popped? There's no balloons. Like, what popped? Was that inside of me? Or what happened? So I was like kind of scared to stand up. And so he got back into the bedroom, and I finally got the courage to stand up, and nothing came out when I stood up. So I was like, okay, maybe it was just like, it's 1:45 in the morning. Like, maybe I'm just making stuff up, you know? Went to the bathroom and I sat down and just gush. And I was like, oh, I did hear a pop. I
Yeah.
went back into the bedroom, told my husband, my water just broke. And so he called my midwife or texted my midwife, and she was like, just try to go back to sleep if you don't have any contractions. And I was like, well, before I do that, I'm going to change my clothes. I'm going to go get something to eat and drink, because if labor does start, then I want to have like food and be hydrated right now. And by the time I did all of that, contractions started. And so I flipped the TV on and was just kind of laboring in my bedroom, kind of just standing there. They weren't difficult. I didn't feel like I was really working through anything, but I didn't want to stop moving until labor picked up. So I was trying to stay upright and kind of swinging around and rolling on my ball and stuff. And I decided to check myself and see where I was at. And I was at about a 4 when I checked myself. And so I sent my husband to go start filling up the birth pool. And I was like, I'm going to take a bath. I'm just going to go hang out in the bath. And so I was laying in the bath and I'm just scrolling Instagram, just totally chilling, nothing exciting.
Nothing too painful, yeah.
And I finally had this thought. I was like, I'm going to switch to the Christian hypnobirthing tracks and just kind of, I'm going to turn my mind off and go into like my labor land so that I'm in control right now, so that when labor picks up, I'm not having to switch into that mindset. So
that's very smart, because once you are ready in that intensity, you can't just be like, oh, like thinking very logical, let me get my hypnobirthing track on. It's too late.
Well,
so that's very wise.
Yes, that's what I decided to do based on my previous birth, because I went from, just hanging out to this is awful. I can't peel my fingers off the hospital bed. So I was like, I need to be able to be already in labor land. So I did that, and my husband was still filling up the pool. And at this point, it's probably like 3:00 in the morning. So, and my contractions had started just after 2. So like I spent some time in my bedroom for, 45 minutes, kind of just hanging out, and then decided to switch to the bathtub. Because they had kind of started to pick up, but I still was like, this is nothing compared to, because I was comparing everything to Pitocin contraction.
Yeah.
I was like, this is nothing. But I was like, I'm just going to go hang out and wait. So now it's probably like 3:00. I switched to Christian hypnobirthing around 3 a.m. My husband's filling up the pool. My midwife is on her way. My photographer is on her way. And I'm like, everybody's going to be here. It's going to be fantastic. And so I'm in hypnobirthing for probably 15 minutes, and I have this contraction where I'm like, my body is pushing the baby out.
Oh, wow.
And so I kind of was trying to stop it, like kind of squeezing to like, because I'm in the bathtub by myself. Like my midwife's not here. My husband is filling up the birth pool, not in the bathroom. Like, my photographer is not here. And so I'm kind of squeezing almost. I don't think I was doing very much, but trying to keep him in. Yeah. And so the contraction ended, and I was slightly confused because I was like, how is he coming? I'm not in transition. This is not hard. This is like, what's going on? So I yelled for my husband, and I was like, he's coming. He's coming right now. And so my husband runs out of the bathroom to go get his phone to call my midwife, and he comes back in, and I had switched to kneeling on one knee and had my other leg up to see if he was crowning. I was reaching my hand in to see if he was crowning. The next contraction started and he just shot into my hand.
Wow.
So I was like, I was crowning and now I'm holding a baby. And
Wow.
so that was at 3:18. So my labor was, my water broke at 1:45 a.m. and I had a baby by 3:18
That's amazing.
in the morning.
Wow.
And I just sat there. And my midwife was like 10 minutes late. My photographer was right behind her. And I just was sitting in the bathtub now with my baby. And I waited for my midwife to get there to kind of help me navigate back down, because the cord was kind of short. And so I was worried about pulling him around. I didn't want the cord to snap or anything. So she helped me sit back down and we waited for my placenta to come on its own time. Waited for the cord to stop pulsing. Husband cut the cord. And then I got to climb back into my bed. And she tucked me in, heating pad, blankets, bringing everything. She showed me my whole placenta and explained the whole, where everything works. I had one sister-in-law there that was actually supposed to be there for the birth, but we didn't wake her up because
you didn't think it was going to be that fast.
I didn't. We were going to be having a baby that quick. So she came in and she was talking to my midwife, and anyway, then they were gone by 8 a.m. and I was asleep. And we kept that one a secret for like 2 days that we had the baby.
Nice. Oh, that's nice.
I wanted to wait until my in-laws all got home and just like surprise them, like surprise we had a baby. But my husband was feeling really guilty that we didn't tell them, so we shared the news.
Wow, but what a difference, right? From just in comparison to the hospital birth, just like everything from how fast it progressed, just how calm you felt and the pain. And then once your baby is out, just getting to tuck into your own bed. Like, explain that to me. What is that feeling like in comparison to actually giving birth in the hospital versus giving birth at home?
It's so peaceful. I think the big reason why I'm able to stay calm and in control is because I'm in the comfort of my own space. There's not people here that I don't know. I'm in complete control of how much light is on and how much light is off. I can sit in the birth pool if I want to sit in the birth pool. I can go get in my bed. Like, nobody's telling me what I can and can't do. And I'm really able to kind of just listen to my body. And my fourth labor was a really good experience of kind of moving with my body the way that what feels good, and what is needed. I do feel like you very intuitively move to open spaces or allow things to kind of shift so that baby can work their way down. I do feel like both hospital settings, I was in the same position, you know, on your back with your feet in the stirrups and holding your knees into your chest to push. So being able to kind of just do what I felt was comfortable was very nice. Being able to climb into my bed. I mean, I don't know. Sleeping in those hospital beds is not easy. And
the interruptions, right, from the nurses.
The interruptions, and they don't let you sleep with your baby. So you're not allowed to hold your baby and be asleep on the hospital bed at the same time. And they'll come in and they'll wake you up. Or they'll take your baby and put them in their little bassinet. And so to my midwife to be handing me my baby, to get into bed, to go to sleep, was just, it was so nice. It really is such a spiritual and sacred experience also. I feel like the veil between us and heaven is so thin when there's like a new baby
Yeah,
around.
yeah.
Like it can be very overwhelming if you allow it to be. So
Yeah, you're bringing new life into the world, and it is a big deal, and it should feel like a big deal, and it should
yes.
be this amazing transformative experience, and it shouldn't be just like getting your broken arm fixed at the
Yeah.
hospital, because a lot of the time it's just treated just like another medical procedure. It's just
Yes.
another woman giving birth, and it's like this is like
Just another
the
birth.
experience for the woman. Yeah. Do you find that because you went into the labor land prior to things getting really intense, that in a way helped it not become so intense because you couldn't even tell you were in transition?
I do think so. I do also think that the contractions just were not even the same.
Yeah.
Um, but I do think, and I kept that mindset for this baby as well to kind of make sure that I am setting myself up for transition before I even get there. So I didn't hire a doula. I had kind of wanted one, but I really had to be kind of particular on where we were spending our money, and I had,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and the only reason for my third birth that I had a photographer was because she was offering like a steep discount so
Right.
that she could
Yeah.
kind of get into the birth videography photography
Mm-hmm.
world. And so that was the only reason that we could even do that, because I was like, we had spent pretty much our whole budget on the midwife.
Yeah.
And
That
so I
makes
didn't have a
sense.
doula,
Yeah.
but I was planning on my sister-in-law being there, and we kind of had talked about like these things would be helpful, like this is not going to be helpful. Um, and then I had a very open and candid conversation with my husband about what is helpful and what is not helpful when I am in labor, and
Mm-hmm.
what I need him to be able to do for me. Um,
Yeah.
because he was great during my first
Yeah.
two, but birth just shocks him. So
Yeah.
then he
No.
kind of
Totally.
then he kind of like jaw drops and like kind of
Well,
is in shock
especially when the
for a
baby
second.
comes
Yeah.
that fast, right? That was his first experience with that.
Yes.
So I can imagine
So
him being very shocked with that.
he goes into shock. And so I was like, look, I need you to be able to kind of pull yourself back so that you can
Yeah.
help me, because my
Yeah.
midwife, I was like, if we had discussed kind of if my midwife didn't make it, like what needed to happen kind of
Mm.
immediately after birth, just to make sure that everything is good. And I
Okay.
never felt like there was any cause for concern or anything, but I was like, let's just run through scenarios real fast so that you know what to do. That way
That's
we're
really great that you guys
prepared.
did that because that like it happened with you. It wasn't the
Yeah.
plan. It can happen. So
Yeah.
anyone should always have a plan just in case, even if they're not planning on birthing at home, but if they're just
Yes.
laboring at home before they go to the hospital, sometimes it can be so fast and then they will give birth at home. So it's always a good idea to just talk it out
I
and
agree.
have a little
Anytime
plan.
anyone ever asks me for any sort of like advice on laboring unmedicated, because I do have a lot of friends that want to do unmedicated, but they're not quite ready to do it at home.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
I always suggest that making a plan for if labor is too quick or you spend too much time laboring at home, um, that you need to decide to not go to the hospital, you have a plan.
Yeah.
Because I'm
Yeah.
like, it doesn't sound fun to me to have a car birth,
Yeah. Oh God, no.
to have to, I mean, birth is messy. And so
Yeah.
to have to kind of deal with that in such a confined
Mm.
space and not being able
Yeah.
to move, let alone the dangers of just
Yes.
driving in
Yeah.
general,
Sounds horrible.
um,
Yeah.
it doesn't sound enjoyable to me to
Mm-hmm.
want to do that. That was kind of one of the biggest reasons for me to wanting to stay home versus a birth
Yeah.
center, was like
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to have to drive anywhere.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want
Yeah.
to risk having a car baby.
Yeah.
And I don't want to have to be driving anywhere while I'm in labor.
Totally. So after this unexpected free birth, I guess that changed everything.
Yes.
So tell us, how did it go for your next one? So how long after postpartum did you get pregnant?
So
And
this one was a little bit bigger of a gap. And my first and this baby, hi.
so cute.
She is the only other planned pregnancy.
Okay.
So we've only really planned to be pregnant with our oldest, and then Maeve here. She is 26 months younger. So
Okay.
whatever the math is on that, I cannot do that. Like 18 months-ish postpartum, I think it is,
Yeah.
that I got
Not
pregnant.
even doing math, but sounds about right.
Somewhere around there.
Somewhere like that.
So I was actually still nursing when I got pregnant.
Okay.
Because this was the first
Oh,
time that
she's
I've had a
so
supply.
cute.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Adorable.
Thank you.
It's so cute.
This was my first opportunity not getting pregnant super quickly after that I was able to have a supply that long.
Right.
And so I actually started weaning him right around the same time that we got pregnant with her. And I think that kind of helped me wean him and kind of move him to his own space finally. But so with her, I was planning home birth again, but my midwife was retired. And so I was toying with the idea of free birth just right from the beginning. And we had kind of discussed it after my last one, was like, what would you think if like we just didn't hire anybody for my husband? Like, what would you? Yuckies. What would you think if we did that? And my husband's very trusting of me with all of these types of decisions. He has a lot of trust in me to kind of know when we would need any sort of medical intervention.
So he was on board with...
He was on board with kind of whatever I wanted to do. If I wanted to get a midwife, he was supportive of that. If I wanted to do it on my own, he was supportive of that. And so I decided to just establish care with a midwife group at our hospital near us, just to go see them. And I went to 2 appointments, and I was like, all we're doing at these appointments are checking my blood pressure, weighing me. What else were we doing? I wasn't
listening to the baby's heart.
Yes, but not for the first. No. The first one, yes. The second one, no. And then, we weren't doing anything at these appointments.
Did you get ultrasounds for the last pregnancy?
Okay. I got the first initial one, and then I did do a 20-week scan.
Okay.
And then I did actually go to a boutique ultrasound place at like 36 weeks because I was trying to map her body. Okay. Like on my belly, and I was getting stuck, and I couldn't quite figure out where, like, I could find her bum and I could find her head, but I wasn't feeling her legs. Okay. And kind of tracking that anyway. So I went to just like, can you help me figure out what I'm feeling? And so she kind of helped me point that out. And I was like, okay, this makes more sense then. Because I was having dreams that she was breech. And so I was like, I don't know. I know about breech, but I don't know a lot about breech. So I don't know how comfortable I would have felt knowing that she was breech. Go on and do a free birth by myself. And so I kind of just wanted to like figure out what was going on. And we were in a new place. We had just moved. And So I didn't know any of the providers around here. I didn't know anybody. Anyway, so I went to like 2 appointments and then decided that I can do my own prenatal care. So I bought a blood pressure cuff and a pulse oximeter and a measuring tape to check my fundal height. And I read Spiritual Midwifery by Ina May. And followed her prenatal care advice there. I bought urine test strips to test my urine to make sure there was no proteins in the urine, and kind of just did my own care after 2 appointments.
Yeah.
With those midwives. And I did do a 20-week ultrasound. So I did have them write that.
So did they know that your plan was to free birth, or you weren't 100% sure?
I had brought it up with one of the midwives. So at this point I had started doula work as well. So I hadn't worked with these doulas. I mean, I hadn't worked with these midwives because I wasn't doing hospital births, but I had heard a lot of good things from other doulas who did attend hospital births about their model of care and how they did things. So I did bring it up with one of them who was supportive of me. I don't think I said free birth. I think I just said that I was planning on out of hospital, but I just hadn't kind of figured out what. Jeez, girl.
Right.
What is happening? I hadn't quite figured out what that was going to look like quite yet. I was still kind of toying with different ideas because we started to look at moving near the end of my first trimester. And so I started to kind of look up different laws for midwives in different areas that we were looking. And my sister lives here in Florida, which is why we ended up here, was to kind of just be close-ish to someone that we knew. And so I looked up midwives, and I wasn't really feeling connected to any of their websites. I mean, I probably could have gone on to do consults and maybe would have, but nothing was really like, this sounds amazing. And so I just continued on with doing my own prenatal care. And it got down to the end of pregnancy, and I was like, kind of maybe thinking about hiring a doula, but then I was like, I don't want someone there that I just met one time.
Yeah, totally.
Like, I want a birth team that I know. And so I decided to just move on with doing a free birth. I did have a friend fly in from Texas, but she came the week before I ended up going into labor. So I went to 41 and 3 with her.
Okay, and your friend was coming to support you.
Yeah, and my friend is a doula, so she was planning on coming out, and she spent my whole, like, the end of 39 weeks to the beginning of 40 weeks, because I just kept having these dreams, like, she's for sure going to come on time. And I was like, not that I put too much stock into those dreams at the end of pregnancy, right? I feel like a lot of it is wishful thinking.
Yeah.
But I was like, she's going to come. She's going to come. And so we booked her flight to come, and then she didn't come. And I had a pretty big emotional block, which was preventing me from going into labor. She's my first girl. So I have 3 boys.
Yeah.
And she's my first girl. And I was really scared of keeping the same cycle going with moms and daughters that I that's in my family. And I was really nervous that I was not going to be a good mom to her, and that we were just going to perpetuate this trauma cycle that really kind of came to a head during my pregnancy with her. I was dealing with a lot of trauma and working through healing through this pregnancy. And then the fear of not being a good enough mom, I think, stopped me from going into labor.
Yeah, totally. That does affect for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So I kind of had a conversation with a couple people, and then I had a good little cry session with my husband where I was like, look, I need you to just listen and not try to solve my problem. I don't want it solved. I need to just voice all of these fears. And you need to know what my fears are because you are my husband and the father of the babies that I am bringing into the world. So I need you to understand what my fears are so that you can understand what's going on and help support me. But I was like, I don't want you to try to solve any sort of problems. I just need you to listen right now.
Yeah.
So I cried about it, and then we went to dinner that night. My husband was like, let's go out to dinner. So we took the boys and we went over to dinner and went to bed that night. Well, we got home from dinner, and I purposely got this drink that is actually, it's a really good colon cleanser. It like really just helps move things through. And I was like
at the restaurant you got this?
At the restaurant, yeah. Because of I'm sure it's whatever, it's not good for you. It's not good. But their Blue Crush lemonade, whatever is cleansing. That is.
Yes, I bet.
This is better than castor oil.
Wow.
So I think I was like, I'll get this drink, and maybe kind of clearing everything out will help labor start. And it didn't. It didn't even clear me out. It just was whatever. So I did have contractions start that night, and I was like, okay, I'm going to keep moving. And then they kind of stopped, and I was like, I'm going to bed. Like, I'm not going to keep trying to push myself.
Yeah, just let it happen when it's going to happen. I was
like, let's go to bed. And I woke up again in the middle of the night at like 2:00 in the morning to go to the bathroom, and thought that I felt my water break. And so I kind of sat there for a second and was like, was that my water? I don't know. I'm just going to go back to bed. I don't feel any contractions. I'm going to go back to bed. So I went back to bed, woke up again like 2 hours later, and same thing, went to the bathroom and felt a big gush again, and was like, that had to be my water. It had to be. I was like, it's not the same as just going to the bathroom. This was definitely my water broke at 2:00, and she just plugged up the hole, and then it broke again, or flushed out again at 4:00. So then my contractions started around 4:00 in the morning. And so I woke up and kind of started to like move around, and we already had the birth pool blown up this time because I was like, I want to be able to use the pool, because last time I didn't. I just him in the bathroom.
Right.
And so the birth pool is already blown up, so we just need to fill it. So my husband started working on that, and I was just kind of walking around and wiping off the counters and cleaning up a little bit through contractions. And my photographer got here around like 5:00, and in between that, I had gotten into my birth pool, but it slowed contractions down. So I did get out and decided to make padsicles, because I hadn't made any yet.
Yeah.
And so I decided to make padsicles, and we started working on breakfast because my boys started to wake up. They get up around like 6:37, so they were all kind of trickling in. And I was just kind of bracing myself on the kitchen table or the counter and just really like breathing through contractions. I had wished my whole pregnancy for a slower labor this time, so that I could actually experience labor. And so it was progressing. I didn't ever check myself this time. I just kind of let it happen.
Did you have plans for someone to pick up the kids, or were the kids always supposed to be there?
We had kind of talked about it. I had a lot of people from our church offer to help with the kids. And I was like, let's just see what's going on. Because I had a lot of people that I knew we could call. We have a fairly large homeschooling community. And so I know a lot of people were available. We
Yeah.
could call if we needed to. And my sister said that we could call her if we needed to come help. But I was like, let's just kind of see what they do.
Yeah.
Because they've been
Yeah.
interested my entire pregnancy on what was going on.
Yeah.
And my oldest was 5. So I had a 5, 3, and then a 2-year-old. And I was like, let's just see what happens. And they were just kind of in and out. They had a toy room that we threw a movie on so that they had something in there going. And they were just kind of in and out. My youngest was very concerned. And he spent a lot of time at my side.
And he was just over 2,
Yeah,
the youngest,
just
right?
turned 2 a couple months before. And so he spent a lot of time at my side in the birth pool, kind of hovering. He would, if I put my head down on the side of the pool, he would pick it up and like look at me and ask if I was okay. And then he would place my head back down on the edge of the pool. And my oldest pulled a chair up right next to the pool and wanted to hang out. And so they ended up being fairly involved. So when I got back into the pool, probably around, now I'm not going to know. She was born just before 9. So I got in the pool probably around 8-ish again.
Okay.
And that's when they kind of started to pick up. So I put my earbuds back in. I turned on some meditation, Christian hypnobirthing again, and kind of let myself go into that. I had to really pause for these contractions. They were stronger than what I had experienced with my third. And I had to kind of move with them. So I was like squatting inside the birth pool, kind of swinging side to side for a lot of it. Because I needed to push a little bit with each contraction to feel like the relief that I was looking for with each contraction. So I was like pushing slightly for, I don't know, probably like 30 minutes with each contraction. Just kind of, I could feel her coming down. And so.
Okay. So it felt good intuitively to just do little pushes.
Push a little, like not the big pushes that you feel, like to kind of slightly crunch a little bit.
Yeah.
I was and push down a little bit. And so then I ended up leaning back a little bit because I was like, maybe if I lean back and she's not sitting right on my cervix, I can breathe for a second with this the way that this was moving. I felt like I wanted a break, which is not something that you get when you're in transition. But like, I was like, I'm just going to sit back for a sec. And I sat back, and when the birth pool has that little seat in it, right? That I was kind of lounging in. I laid back and another contraction started, and she was absolutely coming. And I could feel her crowning. And so I started to kind of slowly push with that one. And she just popped right out with that one.
In comparison to when you were lying down in the hospital, do you find that there was that fetal ejection reflex where you didn't have to push as hard?
Yes. I do think that. I feel like the way that I was laying or leaning back with her was different than the hospital because my knees were not pushed up to my chest to try to make sure that like every part of my body was experiencing birth. I was able to kind of just sit back and I don't really know how to explain this. Just kind of sit back and relax, I guess. And I think it was the relaxing that kind of allowed the rest
Totally.
of the rest of
Yeah.
birth to happen. Because I do think that towards the end there, I was starting to kind of fall into that fear again of not being a good mom to a daughter. And what was originally excitement for a new baby kind of turned into that fear again. So being able to sit back and just relax and kind of remind myself, like, we're doing a lot of things different.
Totally. And the fact just that you're aware of this and it was a fear of yours, you're already doing the right things.
Yeah.
You're already following something different. You're completely aware that
Yes.
this was an issue. I want it to be different. And I hope that just having those thoughts in those moments helped you relax. And
yeah, so she was born just before 9 a.m. and I stayed in the pool until the placenta came, which was probably about 20 minutes of waiting for that.
So were you the one who caught the baby?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So my husband was behind me and she came out and I pulled her up to my chest. She was.
Sure, you got some beautiful photos this time.
I do. I have so many good photos. Good. It's like this was her first birth too, which is why I was able to get her, was because it was affordable as she was branching into birth photography. Awesome. And she was so quick to answer my phone call and to just get in the car and come. And I think she kind of knew that it was a fear of mine to miss
for sure
the whole experience again. So she was making sure that she was not going to miss it. So many good photos that you can kind of scroll through the photos and see exactly what the story was. It was a very good.
That's awesome.
It's very nice to be able to pull those photos out and to look through them again. But
and were your boys there when she came out?
2 of them were. Okay. 2 of them were. My oldest had slid away into the toy room and came out right after she was born. He actually brings it up all the time that he did not get to see her born.
Aww.
And that the next one, he wants to make sure that he's there to see the baby get born. So he is very, very excited for when that happens, which is not going to be soon again. But
but that is beautiful that they're growing up seeing birth as something normal and natural and not to be feared.
Yes. And I think it will be so good because they're 3 boys, right? 3 boys that have been able to kind of be heavily involved.
Yeah.
That I hope it is a blessing for their wives.
Totally.
That they understand and have experienced birth from a young age, that they won't be kind of the whole joke around men in labor.
Yeah.
Where they don't understand what's happening and they're not helpful and they're
totally
passing out on the floor.
I'm sure it will be very beneficial to them. And do you find that the postpartum was any different this time around?
Yes. With both my 3rd and my 4th, I feel like healing was much, much better.
Yeah.
And with this one, I didn't have any sort of stitches or anything.
Did you have stitches with the 3rd one?
I did.
Okay.
So she gave me like 2 stitches, which I probably could have gone without, but I was like staring at my baby.
Yeah.
And was like, yeah, whatever. Do whatever needs to happen. That was probably the one thing that we had not talked about before was whether or not I wanted to be stitched up if I tore. And so this time I did feel a tear and I just let it heal naturally. But healing without stitches is so much easier.
Yeah.
There's no pulling. There's no poking. There's no being able to go to the bathroom and not have to worry about snagging on stitches.
I heard about that. Yeah.
Everything has been so much better.
Good, good. And
healings faster.
yeah.
There
Oh,
was
so
no
good.
fundal massages.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And postpartum depression also nothing
No,
to
and
worry about.
I do think that moving was the right call
Yeah,
because
yeah.
it's what, mid-January, and so in Utah right now it would be,
Mm-hmm.
negatives,
Yeah.
maybe tens,
Yeah. I'm in
teens.
Toronto,
Yeah,
so it's pretty similar.
snow, and it gets so dark.
Yeah,
And I do feel like being here where I can look outside right now and like, yeah, the sun is up. It's
totally.
chilly.
Yeah, but it's still
It's
like
like I can still go
not
outside in a
painful.
t-shirt and pants and no shoes.
Exactly,
Touch
and more
ground without
sun.
being.
Yeah, the sun is so healing, and
Yes.
especially in postpartum, it's
Yes.
so nice to be able to just go outside more often and
Yes.
get that sun and fresh air. Yeah. Well, that's amazing. I love the transition and, how you came to the decision at the end and you
Yes.
felt empowered and knowledgeable and confident enough in your own body to go through and everything went well. There was
Yeah.
nothing scary, and I'm sure if at any point anything scary or anything that worried you happened, you would have just transferred to a hospital. And like you said, you weren't sure if the baby was breech, if you would have been comfortable free
Yeah.
birthing, so you wanted to get that checked out. So you did all the right things, You
Yeah.
really just you were in power. You were the
Yes.
authority. You listened to yourself. You tapped into the system whenever you needed
Yeah.
external reassurance for anything. But at the end, you got to have your beautiful, empowering birth where
Yes.
you were the authority. And now you have this beautiful baby,
Yeah.
and you look like you're doing an amazing job. I'm sure you are raising her very well,
Thank you.
and she looks very happy. So thank you. Thank you so much. Is
Yeah.
there anything you wanted to share? Any last thing that you feel like would be important to your story, or a piece of advice that you would want to share for moms listening, pregnant mamas?
Sure. I think so. Everybody always asks me why I free birthed. And if it's because I feel like free birth kind of has this stigma around it that like we don't trust anybody, and that's why we free birthed. And that's not necessarily why I free birthed. It's not that I didn't trust anyone. It was more just an accumulation of circumstances, of why I free birthed. But my hope and my plan moving forward with birth, because I am a doula and I do feel like doulas are extremely beneficial to birth, is to kind of surround myself with women now moving forward that I feel comfortable inviting into my birth space, whether that's a doula or whether it's just friends. I do feel like women need that support, and I do wish that I would have had someone that I had felt comfortable enough to invite into my birth space. We had just
Yeah.
moved here. I didn't have enough time to kind of
Yeah.
find that, which is why we flew my friend out. I do wish that she could have been here
Yeah.
to sit with me and to be with me. But I do feel like women supporting women in labor
Totally.
and should be something that happens. It is extremely
Yeah.
beneficial to just have that
I couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. I didn't hire a doula, and looking back, I wish I did,
Yeah.
because it is a different type of support that you
Yes.
get. Yeah.
Husbands are great. Partners are great.
Mm-hmm.
They can be
They
a
are,
great support,
yeah.
but they don't understand
Exactly.
what you're going through, and they'll
Yeah.
never understand fully
Yeah.
what you're going through.
Yeah.
And not that the
Totally.
person that you invite has to have experienced birth, but just I think the feminine energy that gets brought into the birth space with inviting
Yeah.
someone that you trust into your birth space can change
Totally.
how
Yeah.
your birth goes.
I
So,
agree. I agree.
oh
All right.
my goodness.
Well, thank you so much, Taylor, for coming on and telling me
Yeah.
your story. I loved hearing all of your stories and your experiences. I really appreciate you taking the time. And did you want to drop your Instagram line on here if anyone wants to reach out to you or follow along?
Yeah. It's at Whole Birth Keeper, WHOKE Birth Keeper.
Okay, perfect. And I'll include that in the show notes as well.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for tuning in to Birth Unboxed. If you've enjoyed today's conversation and want to hear more, please consider subscribing to the podcast so you never miss an episode and leaving a review. I'd love to hear your thoughts or even your own birth stories, so feel free to connect with me via Instagram at thebirthunboxed.podcast or through my website linked in the show notes. Until next time, friends.